The question I've always got, Darwin, a very good morning to you, is where can they give us some tax back? Where can they cut tax, which won't sort of disable the economy even further?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show this morning, Mike. And I think what we need to remember is that the economic indicators suggest at the moment that now is the time for Boris to be bold.
Yeah.
After all, what politicians need to remember is that cutting taxes actually delivers higher economic activity, it boosts productivity and delivers more money in people's pockets, all of which we need in this country right now. And so I think what the government should be doing is helping growth really go gangbusters, and the Prime Minister can make a start on that by bringing forward the proposed income tax cut, and in my opinion it should be doubled at the same time.
Absolutely right, because the people are in need of some relief, aren't they? I mean, we keep hearing they should do something about fuel duty because the 5p off didn't really hit the sides, nothing really changed. In fact, if anything, prices went up, and the size of the increase in fuel right now alone is absolutely, you know, firing everything else up the chart, and everything is going up in price, and people are finding that they just cannot afford to buy the things they used to buy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we've got a 70-year high tax burden and a cost of living crisis at the minute. And you were talking about fuel. I believe the average cost of filling up your tank at the minute is over £100. Now, when we look at the amount of that which is tax, that's 47% in fuel duty and VAT in total. And so the government can really take action with the cost of living crisis, especially when it comes to fuel. And it can start by taking a bigger lump out of that fuel duty cut that it initially did, which was welcome, but it needs to go further now because it's clearly not having an impact with the rising cost of crude oil, petrol and diesel.
No, exactly right. So, I mean, within the Treasury's gift, if you like, you know, obviously everybody assumed that they would have to be higher taxes to pay for a lot of the furlough payments and the pandemic and all the rest of it. But presumably they're going to have to slam the brakes on all of that. I mean, we've heard this morning, for example, which we've yet to confirm, that the electric car grant has now been pulled altogether. It was reduced a while back. Supposedly now the government is pulling the grant if you buy a new electric car altogether. Now, if they want people to start driving electric cars, that's not going to encourage them to do so.
No, I mean, it's not, but I think the government now needs to be careful with what it's doing. I mean, we had, obviously, the COVID pandemic. We've had quantitative easing from the Bank of England for years now. And I think what we now need to be careful of is how much we're spending as a country, because that's only going to push inflation up even further. And so I think what the government can do, it can also pause schemes, but it can also cut its own wasteful spending. I mean, for example, we at the Taxpayers Alliance have found that they spent almost £6 billion on waste in a single year alone. And that's only really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to wasteful spending that we see every day here. And so what it can do, I think it needs to have a dual policy on this, really. It needs to be cutting wasteful spending, and it should also be cutting taxes at the same time, because ultimately it's taxpayers, ordinary folk, that know best how to get themselves through this cost of living crisis. And cutting income tax, as I mentioned, and reverting the NI increase that they did in April are two ways for them to do that.
Right, because that's the other question, isn't it? This April national insurance tax rise came in. People were paying more since then. We were then told that there was a sort of convoluted tax rearrangement, which will mean that come July, much of that extra money will not really be there because it will be countermanded in a way by more people being moved out of the lowest tax bracket. So, I mean, has it really made any difference? And if it has made any difference, has the money gone to where it was meant to go, which was i.e. either to social care or to helping the NHS backlog?
Well, when we talk about the national insurance thing, it does seem a bit odd. They seem to be giving with one hand and really taking with the other. And the national insurance increase in the threshold is welcome. It's a tax cut for a lot of people in the country. But it does seem to be odd then that they're also increasing national insurance at all. They may as well just revert the cut instead. And that would be one way to mean that more people have more money in their pocket at the same time. And in terms of where that's being spent, obviously national insurance, it usually goes into a big pot, really. And so it's not entirely sure where this money is always going. And so, as I mentioned, I think what the government should be doing now is a comprehensive approach to actually give more money to people in their pockets. And we found today, we've got some research out, that if they were to cut income tax by 2p, economy, drop VAT down to 17.5% and increase the national insurance threshold, that could deliver £56 billion in increased growth in the economy in 10 years' time. And so I think that's really what we need to have in this country right now. We need to have a low tax policy which is going to deliver growth, higher wages and more investment for this country.
Yes, and that's really what everybody wants. But mostly what people want is an end to the inflationary spiral, the ability to go back to the way it was, if that can be done. I mean, inflation is a difficult thing to reduce. What would you say they should do if they could do anything first?
I mean, we mentioned cutting spending before. There's also what the Bank of England is doing as well, which is increasing interest rates. And what that effectively does is mean that it encourages people to save their money rather than spend it. And so, I mean, that's also one way to mean that they're not spending it perhaps in the economy, but spending it on the cost of living crisis and getting themselves through that. So I think those are the two ways to do it, is cutting wasteful spending in dual with approach with the Bank of England increasing interest rates. And that's really how you get through the inflationary crisis we're feeling right now.
Yeah, because even if they were to do that sort of slashing of public spending that they've talked about, sacking loads of civil servants, getting rid of, you know, various projects that they don't think that they need anymore, there would be a long time before any of that was actually felt, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're talking about cutting 91,000 civil servants across the entirety of government.
Not enough is what I would say.
Quite.
It's a good start.
And that's by 2025, 26, so that would bring it back down to 2015-16 levels. And so I think that's one way, but as you say, those are things that take time, and I think what the public really want to see now is action in the immediate term. And so I think there needs to be a comprehensive review of spending throughout government to see where it can be cut back and where wasteful spending is being done, essentially, in a dual approach, cutting their taxes at the same time, because otherwise I don't think the public are really going to consider this a fair deal they're getting out of the government at this time.